the CA3 team delivered this really creative piece of content that kind of just sold the story of why should you work for DHL.
If your brand is finding it hard to stand out in the market and earn attention, then this episode is just the ticket. We've got 3 great examples for you today, so keep watching and keep listening. Hi, I'm Chris LeCand Harwood, host of the Employer Content Marketing Pod, and welcome to the first episode of 2023. I'm absolutely delighted to have Josh Tumbridge with me today, and he joins me for episode 70, the Big 7-0. As marketeers, we love to see what's going on and seeing which brands are doing a great job in earning the attention of the people they want to engage with. And this episode is all about sharing some of those examples with you. But before we get on with the chat, just like to say a big shout out to Casual, who are our video specialist sponsor for the podcast. Casual are video production specialists who have produced thousands of videos over the years for both employer and consumer brands. So it's great to have them on board as sponsors for the next couple of months. Let's get on with the chat. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Employer Content Marketing Pod. Delighted to have Joshua Tumbridge with me today from Crunch. How you doing, Josh?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Chris. Good to be back.
Yeah, good stuff. So it's episode, I think it was 51, so it feels like a long time ago. A lot of chats have been recorded, but the episode that we had around content marketing and media and the relationship between the two went down really well. So I'll make sure we'll drop a link into the episode description for this one for sure. Thought basically, we kind of as we get to the end of one year and the beginning of the next year, it's often an element of retrospectiveness on things, isn't there? And desperate not to do a predictions thing, Josh. It's that's like done to death, isn't it? But I think for me, it's like I thought it'd be good to get you on because I want to hear about people's kind of thoughts on what they've seen out in the market. Could be in the employer, marketing, employer branding space, but it could be in the consumer space or anywhere else. I think it's really important for us to, share the work that we see. And I think we're quite privileged, although it can be tiring sometimes to be tuned into all the work that's out there, or a lot of the work that's out there. So, before we do that though, let's have a bit of a reminder to any listeners who, God forbid, have not listened to episode 51. Tell us a bit about yourself.
So I'm Josh. I've worked in predominantly digital marketing for probably the last coming up to 9 years now. So I started off at kind of in-house e-commerce side, so very different to kind of, I guess, the recruitment and kind of employer branding side of things, and moved kind of agency sides back in 2019 into Crunch, and we specialize across kind of education, recruitment, work across a couple of commercial and charitable sectors as well. I tend to oversee the larger media strategies and kind of commercially making sure we're delivering like the right strategies and the right results for clients as well. So, so been starting to feel like I've been around the block a little bit, but kind of really getting stuck into kind of the especially the recruitment marketing community, which is fascinating. Yeah,
nice. Well, thanks for getting involved. I know you're busy. I think we could have probably got another episode out of the green room chat that we had just now. It's always good to chat with you. How's it been over the last 12 months? How have you found it in the market? And obviously lots happened. So how have you found it?
A load of people have kind of dropped out of the recruitment market as a whole, kind of through COVID, and then all of a sudden, kind of employers are having to suddenly recruit again and kind of fill these gaps and fill these vacancies that they have. But unemployment is at this record low, and vacancy is at a record high. So you're fighting a very challenging battle at the moment, and kind of what we're finding kind of employers are looking to do more and more of it is a lot of employer branding work, to kind of really get under the skin of kind of making sure that they've got a really strong proposition that they can then put in front of people. And that's really where media kind of like comes into its own a little bit, because if we think about practically, if you've kind of got this, if you're facing audiences who aren't actively searching, which is what the numbers would show us through kind of this disparity between vacancy and unemployment, kind of traditional recruitment strategies just aren't as viable, or are much more expensive now. If you think about how can we be effective with our recruitment marketing campaigns, and how can we try and drive impact and make sure that our budget and our money isn't being wasted.
Mm.
Those traditional routes to hire through traditional job board buying isn't the only route to talent acquisition success.
Mm.
That for an active audience, the traditional active audience, traditional recruitment audience, absolutely. The job boards are a great place to be, and it's a great place to make sure you've got this multi-channel approach. But because there's that behavioural change kind of in the talent acquisition space, we've got to try and find new and disruptive ways of really engaging with people, and that's where media does work with recruitment, and recruiting can really help capture eyeballs. Ultimately, you're buying eyeballs. You're buying ears and eyes and kind of attention. How can we use media to kind of disrupt it, and how can we use media to kind of engage with people? And that, and it's only as good as the content that you can then put in front of them. So
100%.
the employer proposition, the brand proposition is integral and is key to any media success, because you've got to be able to not only tell a story through the creative, but then tell that story through the content placement itself. So the two really, really go hand in hand. So kind of like, as a bit of a state of the nation, it's, employer branding is more important than ever. Employer proposition is more important than ever. But then we've got to think about these non-traditional routes. You've got, people are still looking all the way up to kind of like volume hires, for whether it's cabin crew or kind of HGV drivers, all the way down to kind of niche tech roles still.
Mm.
So there are opportunities in the market, and media offers you the opportunities to tap into that. So it's been an interesting year. I think we're in a bit of a state of flux at the moment, kind of culturally and economically, and but there are always solutions, not problems, and there's always a solution. I'd always like to think the media can offer a good solution, but there's ways out of it. But kind of as a whole, it's been exciting. There's we can see kind of, I know you don't do trends, but you're looking at kind of this development of AR and Meta coming down
massively,
really quickly down the path. And I think that's a really, really exciting opportunity for people to tap into. There are definitely challenges there. There's almost this question of who watches the watchman, who pleases the metaverse, that kind of thing. But then if the term metaverse is used quite broadly to describe kind of these virtual places. You can create virtual spaces that people can then engage with, which is kind of like a plug-in headset rather than like a full-on Oculus. Which you can control, and you're kind of seeing the likes of IKEA and I think Roblox, the kids game, have kind of started creating these virtual experiences, haven't they? So I think there's this really exciting kind of like commercial opportunity, or just a brand opportunity in general, to create these virtual spaces where people can engage with them. And in a recruitment perspective, if you'd think of the recruitment world, can you create a virtual experience of what a day in the life is like? If you're struggling to recruit for these roles, can you create these virtual pieces of content where someone can experience your factory, can experience your workplace? I think there's so much opportunity there. And then from a commercial perspective, I think you like to think that we're not going to turn into some Wall-E kind of environment, but the opportunity to live virtually is just kind of ever growing through the technology developments and kind of what we're seeing at the moment. So there's loads out there.
You're 100% right. I think it's like I think over the years, I've seen it where ultimately think about a graduate brochure with profiles in there, or a listing on a job site of a profile of an individual, or a video of a day in the life. Is ultimately all about putting you in the shoes, in the seat of that individual who works there. So absolutely what you're talking about is a big tick, isn't there? It'll take a bit of time to get that right, but it goes back to the point about, and we talked about on our previous episode, about that importance of content. And so kind of on that, it's like, I think I sometimes find it, well, I'm like super plugged into like all the marketing messages I see. If I see something on TV or something online, I either go, oh, I can't understand that, or I like that. And my wife is like, what's going on? But I enjoy it, So reason for saying that is I think we are in a position where we do actually get to see a lot of work out there, a lot of marketing out there. So kind of what is it like over the 12 or so, months? What is it you've seen out there that you think has particularly put a smile on your face? It doesn't have to be just employer, it can be consumer as well.
I'll start with the employer, and I think I would. As I said to you this before, I'd definitely get in trouble with the team if I didn't mention their own work, which
Yeah.
which sounds a bit kind of blow your own trumpet, but a huge shout out to the CA3 team, and one of the guys. So we partner with CA3 to run a HGV campaign with DHL. So DHL were really struggling, kind of like coming out of the back of COVID, with HGV drivers. It's kind of in the news, everywhere. And the CA3 team delivered this really creative piece of content that kind of just sold the story of why should you work for DHL so well. Kind of removed a huge amount of barriers. We could talk about pensions, talking about kind of like ease of work and working hours, and kind of the excitement of the job and why you should be doing it. So they did an incredible job that side. And then we got to marry it up with kind of media buying. And one thing that I think really helped us stand out was CA3 pulled together one of the HGV drivers singing Bohemian Rhapsody in the front of his lorry.
Oh yeah, brilliant. I love that.
Which was just really nice, really creative, and kind of who hasn't sat in their car and kind of belted out kind of one song or another, or kind of like a very Wayne's World kind of esque kind of sing along. And then we took that onto the different platforms, and one that worked really well for us was TikTok, which sounds maybe doesn't sound so traditional, but kind of what we found, and kind of I guess a bit of the tactics and the strategy behind it, is that the team found that you can target on TikTok through hashtags, and you can engage through hashtags. And what those hashtags do is kind of show you basically how large those audience sizes are, or how large those digital communities are. And that's what they are, they're digital communities. TikTok is probably less a social platform and more a community platform where people are just sharing content. It's a short form video content.
It's a entertainment platform, isn't it?
Exactly. And you're getting hit with all these different types of content. Mine is predominantly golf and games at the moment, which probably shows what I'm looking at. But you can be engaged based off your interest in Excel and kind of and tips and tricks there. But if you chuck a couple of HGV keywords into there, you can start to see these communities form through the hashtags. So the team saw that as a really nice opportunity. I said at the start that State of the Nation, you're kind of ultimately you need to try and engage with the passive audience, right? Because if the active audience isn't really looking, and there's that huge gap in the market between unemployment and vacancy, then you've got to find different ways to cut through the noise. And cut through the noise is a term that's used, and especially in marketing, kind of probably in every brief, right? It's like, how do we cut through the noise? And I don't think there's anything more innovative than placing content onto platforms that traditionally maybe haven't been capitalized on with recruitment, or they're so new to market. It's something that I see a lot of kind of clothing, apparel, kind of that type of work, and I'm starting to see a lot more kind of like film trailers and kind of that type of thing. But recruitment marketing is kind of like a completely different ball game. So you're absolutely going to cut through the noise if you can engage with that, and then if you can layer on some really kind of intricate target, you can target people down to the nearest postcode. So why can't you target drivers sat in the queue to Dover? Tell them there's a brighter future sitting around and kind of sitting with you. So that picks up, I think, one award at Digital Impact, and then 4 at the RMAs. So like I said, if I didn't talk about that or give that acknowledgement, I'm sure CA3 would bite my head off as well as the internal crunch team, because it's been it delivered such great success, and kind of I think the client, the DHL, asked us to turn the campaign off at one point because it was performing so well, which was a good email to get. So huge recognition to Noel and the team, and to the media team, my side as well.
Well, it's it's fair enough, because I was there at the awards, and I was a judge at the awards as well, and DHL didn't sit in the categories I was judging, so I was a bit gutted not to have seen it. But it won a bag of awards, there, and Noel and the guys at DHL were super happy about it. So I think it's in particular, I think what's great about it is the fact that it's as close to native content as possible. There's
Mhm.
lots of people talk about native, and I think it's like it can mean different things. And I've probably said this before. I'm sure I've said this before, but it's native is stuff that looks like it belongs, rather than just content that just sits amongst the truly native content. So someone singing and someone singing with that sense of freedom in their lorry that is as natural as you can get. I think that is great.
It's all the nice thing as well that it's all data driven.
Yeah,
You can see the audience sizes on there, which then gives the creative guys that not the knowledge that the platform's the right place, but then also the freedom to go, okay, well, how can we create native content that will sit there really well? And I think that's how kind of data driven media strategies and the creative content will work so well together. So it's really, really nice to see, and kind of obviously landed really well with the industry too. So no, it's a really fun one, real fun one.
And what else? Should we go? Should we pop over to the consumer space now? What have you seen?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to sound a bit boring, but this was something that really captured my attention to engage me. Is so kind of over the last year or so, WhatsApp have kind of been going through this huge privacy overhaul, and then have been trying to find the best way of communicating that. So they've changed the way that people that you're seen to be leaving WhatsApp groups, images that are sent once, you can no longer screenshot over them, and there's all these layers of privacy being built into the platform, into the Meta platform.
Yeah.
And what they did as that final space of communication was just totally take over. I think it was Piccadilly with the LED lights, and it's something that's really, really interesting to take a look at, just because of the way that this interactive content, and the way that the content completely dynamic, the way that the content works. So they had one of the biggest LED spaces available to try and purchase, and then created this really nice interactive content piece where the way that the LED lights sit around this building, and they made it look like the building was almost being scaled back, like dissolving and then unraveling itself to then deliver all this type of content. So you're seeing these huge 3D LED locks and cogs, and it's just a really, really great way. Ultimately media is buying eyeballs and trying to capture people's attention. And the media buy, you could buy the largest space in London, you can buy the largest space across the country, across the globe, but it's only as good as the content that you've got. And for such a creative, to have such a creative piece of content which really maximized on almost this augmented reality feel, with the building scaling back, these locks and padlocks and cogs all twisting and turning to then communicate this message, was just something that I thought was just really, really engaging, and just really, really clever in general.
Well, I remember seeing lots of stuff around, say, Euston as well. Big, not to that extent, but I remember there's a lot of variety to it. And I think in particular, because actually the advertising I saw in Euston was more kind of the practical, showing what is possible. Showing that that you can leave groups, you can do this, whereas the Piccadilly Circus was more about kind of high impact, grabbing people's attention, which I suppose is understandable given that people are moving around a lot in Piccadilly, whereas at a train station they're more likely to be waiting for that blooming train to turn up on time. So there's more kind of dwell time there, which means they can spend more time with that content.
But it's showing a connected user journey, isn't it?
Yes.
You're blending types of content that are being maximized to do things. You're maximizing the opportunity to create impact, to capture items, and that's what that hero piece is doing. That hero piece is then is going, wow, look at us, look at what we're doing. But then you've got those other bits and pieces that are driving consideration, that aren't just trying to capture eyeballs and make you look at it, but also make you think and capture hearts and minds. And that it's a really nice just this hyperlocal multi-channel approach, or diverse content diverse approach, where you've got that hero piece of content, and then these kind of thoughtful engagement pieces that kind of sit alongside it that just communicate that story really nicely.
Yeah, definitely. It's the old, YouTube strategy of hero, hub, and hygiene content, isn't it? And it's worth anyone who doesn't know about that to search that and read up on it. It's some good stuff there, definitely.
Yeah.
So what else have we got? What else? I mean, it's so easy to go into loads of depth here, but I want to kind of keep this a bit short. What else have you seen out there that's particularly? Let's have a third one. What have you seen that's struck you, put a smile on your face?
Put a smile on my face. I'm a sucker for the Just Eat advert, and I think it's just I just really like the way that they've mixed it up, and they're diversifying the content, but in quite a natural way, where they've created this quite impactful brand message that they've got, and kind of the slogans, and kind of that really catchy kind of theme sheet that they've got alongside it, and they hammered it home with Snoop Dogg last year, and I think it's McCann that delivered this. They hammered it home last year, and it takes over your TVs, and kind of like you're humming it and you're thinking it, and now they've mixed it up again and brought Katy Perry into the mix, and it's quite simple, but it's nice to see that they found a brand message that they believe works, but they've also looked to recreate the content a little bit, so you're avoiding that brand fatigue that inevitably people will experience through having so many exposures. They are driving impact through the content, because people are remembering it, people are resonating with it. Snoop Dogg has now got his own cookbook from crook to cook. I'm sure, I think Just Eat's played a little part of that, but
yeah.
To then mix it up again, and to bring in kind of like another kind of iconic musician to kind of deliver the same message, is a really nice way of refreshing that brand content without having to redo the whole process. I think they've got, it's almost like they've discovered their placeholders, and they changed that picture in the middle, like they've refreshed it through the icon sitting within it. So I just really like it. I was watching, I think I was watching All Four the other day, and it popped up as I was cooking in the house. I just thought, what a clever way. It's really nice to see that continuity. They're not completely they haven't completely reinvented the brand again. They haven't completely reinvented the message again. The message is exactly the same. They're just refreshing the type of content to make sure that people don't get exhausted by it and fatigued by it. I thought that's just a really nice way of kind of refreshing a commercial campaign.
Yeah, and it's not only is it refreshing, it is understanding that there's going to be people who like Snoop less and like someone else more. And then you're opening up a new audience that may not have seen that, or may not have really recognized it and resonated with it as much. Even the thing about the spin-off from this being, although probably not directly linked with Just Eat, but the Cook to Crook book means that actually when people see that, they probably think about those Just Eat ads as well, which is hat tip to the content that they created.
Absolutely. And I think it's just a really nice face to refresh, a really nice way to refresh the face and keep the brand message the same. I think brands often get dragged into this reinventing the wheel when you don't have to. I think what I see so much of, and is hemorrhaging content and not leveraging content. And content is hemorrhaged when you kind of like you do it once, and you kind of move on, and you forget how strong and powerful it was, and you don't really kind of make it worthwhile, or kind of really kind of drive that impact home. Whereas if you can find such a strong brand story, did somebody just say Just Eat, and that really, really great message, and something that's so catchy and becomes so part of that identity, if you can then just refresh it with a new face and just a new way of kind of really kind of mixing it up, and I think it's perfect. And it's nice to see the difference as well, because kind of Snoop Dogg's ads were very kind of him on the throne, kind of like on the bed, kind of like very, I guess almost 90s-esque of the way that he positioned his image, whereas Katy Perry's is very much playing into kind of like, she's quite, you've got the cakes flying about, that old suit that she used to wear with kind of like the whipped cream and the cherries and everything.
Iconic.
It's played into the musicians' identities as well, but in the hands of Just Eat. I just think it's a really nice piece of content.
I think that's a good example of how I'd be surprised if this didn't happen with Just Eat and Katy Perry and Snoop Dogg, where they were given probably decent amount of creative license over things, creative control over it, because they understand that they know their own brand, they know the people that love them. So actually, it wasn't going do it this way and directing it heavily. It's basically using content creators, using influencers in the right way, using them because they understand their audience, using in a way because they know what they stand for as a brand. When you do that, you get probably supercharged creative than you would do if you just try to do it within the walls of an advertising agency, just within the walls of an advertising agency.
No, definitely. I can't, obviously, I haven't got a personal relationship with either Snoop Dogg or Katy Perry, but I'd like to think on that reflection, on that comment, that they probably have had some kind of input to it.
Yeah, exactly.
They probably know how they want to be positioned within the market as well.
Exactly.
And what it looks like. So no, absolutely.
Well, there's actually an episode I did with recently, actually, with Nick Francis from Casual, formerly known as Casual Films, and we did like a mini series about future content trends. One of the things we're talking about was what brands, what employer brands, and consumer brands, what employer brands can learn from content creators and YouTubers. They're absolutely plugged into their audience. They're constantly looking at what sticks with their audience. And actually, you've got the likes of Mr. Beast, who's a multi-billion-dollar company in the making there, and literally he creates a product and is potentially going to be threatening a global brand like McDonald's.
Yeah,
with his Mr. Beast burgers. It's crazy, but there's a lot that brands can learn from YouTubers, and even employer brands are.
Look at is it Logan Paul and KSI with Prime? For love or money, my nephews would go through hell and back to try and get one of those bottles, and I'm sure they must taste just like any average, I don't know.
They don't taste very nice, but
really. I've not tried one, but it's incredible how kind of they've created those identities through kind of that short form content, and kind of people are just moving seamlessly through, especially through video content. It's so powerful. People are moving seamlessly through those pieces of video content, through screen time, through to television time. And so it's just really important, especially from a content perspective, for marketers and anyone to be able to maximize that and be able to play to the strengths. The short form video, get straight into the action. I'm sure I've seen a couple of the Just Eat adverts, which is just that short form, 5-10 second long ads on TikTok. Whereas you've got the long form. I saw a petition for someone trying to get that Just Eat, that Katy Perry song on Spotify. That's the impact that's having when you can marry really strong content together.
Definitely. It's if anyone's interested, that the link, I'll put the link to the episode with Nick about that. It goes into a decent amount of detail. But yeah, it's I think often people can go, well, YouTubers, it's not business, is it? Isn't it just like fun stuff? Even I think maybe the phrase of isn't it just like cat videos, is still actually relevant, I think, for maybe a lot of people who have control over budgets. But I might be being a little bit cynical there. But there's definitely a lot of business lessons that could be taken from YouTubers, because they literally are, they can drop something. Kylie Jenner's the same, Joe Wicks in the UK, they can drop something and they know that that's right for their audience because they're absolutely plugged into what they need. But then also it flies when they drop it. So
I think Mr. Beast is quite a good example, because he did his own Squid Games, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
He did his own version of Squid Games. He does these ridiculous giveaways where he's handing out like hundreds to thousands of pounds of technology or gifts. Or I think he had one piece of content with Sidemen, I think, where they had to keep their hands on a jet plane at all times. Seen that?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff he comes out with is just almost insanity from a commercial perspective. But he's created. I'm sure he said. I saw him on a Jimmy Kimmel interview a few months ago. He was talking about how much the value of how much he's given away through his content, and it's millions of pounds. But he lands so well. He's found a way of positioning content in such a great way and kind of engaging audiences that people watch it.
Definitely. Yeah, it's fantastic what he's doing. Yeah, I think what Nick talks about this and goes into kind of more detail around it. And I think, yeah, if anyone wants to get involved in that, there's also an online workshop. So I'll drop that into the link here. But good stuff. Well, I'm sure we could chat for much longer. But yeah, it's good. Maybe we revisit this later on in the in the year. Because I really want to kind of just shine a bit of a light on the kind of work that the marketing that we see out there, and so that people can learn from it, even if it's not employer focused. There's a lot of learnings that can be taken from it. So
I think the themes are all run true, and you can you can mirror a lot of those across industries. So
absolutely good stuff. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Mamma mia, mamma mia, mamma mia, let me go. Beelzebub has a devil, but here I go again on my own. Going down the only road I've ever known. Like a drifter, I was born to be wild.